It's Neil Ross. I noticed I was watching a cartoon called Voltron. I've been watching that a lot lately. And he plays a character that's almost like a kid, which is Pidge.
Yeah.
And then he'll play like... And it's
Neil
amazing.
Ross, friend.
I'm sorry.
He has that capability. He also does great impressions.
Oh.
He can sound like... There are a number of big star actors that he can do a dead-on impression of. Besides being able to do other kinds of characters that are not necessarily impressions of famous people. But he's a very versatile voice actor.
Yeah, I thought that was just really amazing how a voice actor can, like you said, it can be a young kid, or it can be an older, gruff type character, like a doctor or something like that. And
that's part, Rosemary. That is the tools of the business. I get all of us in this business, especially directors or producers, get calls saying, "Hey, how do I get into voiceover? I've been told they have a very interesting voice," and they don't know that you can't make it on just one voice, one interesting voice. You've got to make it on being able to do, because of the way the business works, people are called upon to do various characters within one show, even talk to themselves, as I said Frank Welker could do, and most of the actors can do, is talk to themselves, make it sound like two different voices entirely. But when an actor calls, or a would-be actor calls and says, "But people keep telling me I have an interesting voice," that won't cut it. You have to be able to do that much more than just have an interesting voice. You have to have a series of interesting voices and be able to manipulate them and change them and read well quickly. There's so many aspects to it. The actor who comes in and starts to blow his lines is going to blow his career almost immediately. An actor who is versatile as a voice actor has to pretty much be able to read lines without making mistakes. And not many people know how to do that. There are tricks to learning to do it, but it's not something just because you have a nice voice, you aren't going to get work from that. You have to be able to read well, which means to be able to not make mistakes as you're reading. You have to be able to characterize in several different ages, several different characters, and probably have one or two that are your own unique voice sounds. You remember Inspector Gadget?
Oh, yeah.
Remember the Claw?
Oh, yeah.
You know who played that?
That was Frank Welker, yeah.
Frank Welker. And I never could understand how he could get a voice down here like that and make it believable. I have a lower normal register than Frank has, but Frank can fake. By that I mean create a voice that's lower than my normal voice. Yeah. And I don't know how he does it.
He has an amazing voice acting talent, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
So you said
and a delightful person to work with.
You know, I also heard recently that he's very quiet, and I don't know if it's like whenever he's around friends, if he's more outgoing or if he's the shy, quiet type. But I've heard that he's not.
He's just a very regular person. Some actors are on all the time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Frank is not. Frank can be when the occasion demands. If it's let's say a funny rehearsal where people are just having a ball doing the show, he will do his part and say funny things and do funny things. But he doesn't. I know actors who I will not mention who tend to come in and want to be the center of attention, want to be very funny. Sometimes somewhat smutty or somewhat, say, inappropriate, just to attract attention. Frank would never do that.
Yeah.
He's just an extremely nice guy who I think, this is my guess, doesn't like to go to conventions. attentions, doesn't like to present himself as the center of attention or call attention to himself.
Yeah.
His talent will do that. I mean, you will sit back and listen to him and say, wow, and he do it. But it's not something he uses to call attention to himself.
Yeah, it's just a job, and it's something he enjoys doing.
Yeah, and I think he's uncomfortable calling attention to himself by going to conventions and appearing on panels, or being the star of the show.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with being the star of the show. Some people, their personality is that way. But Frank is never the one to force himself onto a situation. And I think that's why he's probably done extremely well in the business. I think he's has an airplane, flies. But he does things that are kind of quiet and personal. And not noise making, if you know what I mean by noise making.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Rose, here's a sort of interesting incident from about 20 years ago. You know what a storyboard is?
Oh, yeah.
The rough pencil sketches that they look kind of like a comic book. Well, the artists who draw those carefully read the screenplay, and then they draw the scenes the writer has described. It's a guide for everyone who works on a project. But it's a little bit complicated for actors to try to use it as a script. Yeah. So usually, the actors' lines, their dialogue, is typed out in a separate script. It's called a dialogue-only script. There's no description in it of the scenes or of what's happening in the scenes. It's just the actors' words. So one day, Margaret Loesch, now the very knowledgeable CEO of the Hub Network, visited one of my sessions. She was just checking out how the show was going, how the actors were performing, and how the direction was going. Now, it was my habit to scribble little notes and symbols in the margin of my copy of that dialogue-only script, both to remind myself of all the things I needed to tell the actors about what was going on in the storyboard, and whether they needed to be hushed and secretive, or were shouting in the midst of battle, or were exhausted laboring up a mountain trail. And if a high-explosive rocket had just gone off, I'd scribble a little explosive burst where that happens in the script, and use probably a one-word description of the reaction I wanted from the actors, like whether it was screams or big grunt-type reactions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then I have the copies of that script, my marked-up script, given to the actors to work from.
Oh, you know what?
I heard later that Margaret had mentioned to some associate that Wally Burr doesn't seem to feel he needs to use a storyboard in directing recording sessions. What wasn't apparent was that I'd spent hours, really hours literally, studying every nuance and detail of the storyboard. I could tell you what was happening in every frame and panel in detail. And if a question arose about any scene or line of dialogue, while I was using the dialogue-only script, I had my own storyboard copy on the floor at my feet. So if needed, I could immediately haul it up and talk about it with a producer and resolve the problem. Mm-hmm. For years, I felt Margaret had me marked as a kind of a smart-aleck, slipshod voice director who didn't think he needed a storyboard.
Thanks to Samantha Norwick, I actually have a script with the notes on it, like stressed, or if someone was like excited, there'd be little notes in different locations.
Very short things that could just remind the actor at the time he was about to speak his line that it had to be compressed or forced or angry or whatever it might be. Just a one-word description of the emotion that was central to what was going on, enough to remind them of how to play that part.